Dave Ronne, hey, good to see
Brad
you
Leeper.
again.
Yeah.
Fascinating conversation we're about to have here. Having had a sneak preview of this, I'm absolutely intrigued with what you've come up with along with your colleagues at 12 Stone. This is going to be very beneficial as we tackle the question of how do you vision cast at the end of 2021 and how do you vision cast for 2022, particularly with a view toward year-end giving, as that's obviously where a lot of giving is done toward the year end, and vision is a pretty significant correlation to the giving. So you are the expert in vision casting and helping to communicate that to a congregation. We are eager to tap into your creativity and to your brain. As a reminder for where Dave is, he's the creative worship lead and influencer, all kinds of words we can throw in there. 12 Stone Church, which you now call, has two expressions. Used to be one church, 7 locations. Now it's a church with 2 expressions, in person and at home. So you're going to get into that a little bit later. And Dave, you not only work at 12 Stone, but help churches across the country think through these things and how to vision cast. So we are grateful for a few minutes with you today. So David, as we think about vision casting for year
David.
end, yes, David.
That's only my wife calls me David, so that's good though. We go way back, but I didn't know we went that far back.
Okay, well let's reverse it and go with Dave. How about that?
I'm good with that.
Good deal. You've created some structure about how you're thinking about vision casting. Let's start there. What are the buckets that you're coming up with?
Well, as we've been obviously talking about this for a while, like I would hope and I pray that lots of other churches have been, and I've been, if I'm an expert in vision casting, it is only because I've got 25 years into having contributed to and watching it done here. That certainly has influenced how I view it. And I've been through a few of these seasons, albeit not anything like this particular one, which has been, from a selfish standpoint, as challenging as the last 18 months have been, it's been really exciting because God is doing some new stuff, and it's always fun when I'm a dinosaur now in the church. I'm not really the creative lead anymore. There's tons of people who are doing that. I'm just here as a mentor or a Yoda, or I think they give me the official title now of creative design, which means they still value my input, but somebody else is going to actually do the hard work, which is sort of nice. So what's really true is that I have to think in certain segments or frameworks. And so it's easy to underestimate, I think, Brad, just how significant how we roll our weekend services out, and how creative communication plays into creating a culture of generosity. That's been sort of difficult to do, honestly, the last 18 months because of just where we've been in our culture. And now there is that sense that, okay, here we come. We're coming through the fall. We're going to head through a new season, and what's that mean for us? Where are we going? And our congregations are looking at us, and they want to know what we're going to do, how we're going to do it, why we're going to do it. Those types of things are super critical right now because last year we all had to redefine the hows and the whys and the whats and all that stuff. Mm-hmm. So now it's a fresh, it's still, COVID's still out there, it's still concerned, but we are seeing more movement. So I think, for me, I've just sort of boiled it down into to be successful going through this fall, and really to me almost, even further beyond this, in order to continue to regain our momentum in our culture and in our communities. It's being really clear on your next season and being really clear on your next strategy to achieve whatever you're going to focus on in the next season, and then being really clear on your next stories, because the church, and I know it alliterates. I'm sorry,
it works. I got next season, next strategies, next story. I've already captured it
Well, there you go.
in 4 words. So
My
well done. You
homiletics
should.
professor would be proud of me from
Oh,
1985. Yeah.
indeed. But I can't wait to unpack this
Yeah.
because there are wins and barriers in each of these stories and very pragmatic steps. So start with the next season. What does that mean? And what are the barriers that you found in that?
Well, honestly, I like addressing this one because I think the next season it's a little more long term than just even through the fall. I think when you're thinking of what your next season's going to be, it's probably going to incorporate this school year. Obviously, the August to through next summer type of thing. I think most churches sort of tend to think in school year ways, unless you're in that liturgical calendar. But even then you're still thinking like your congregation is apt to go to life. So I think it's just that it's more than a weekend, it's more than a series. I think a lot of people think about vision casting and generosity as I'm going to do a series. This is one of those things you got to keep that focus clear on the next season. What is the next season? What is your long-term purpose? And this is probably even beyond next year for a lot of us, and a lot of what we're doing here. It's a focus we're going to carry for quite some time, but that's our purpose. This is really where we're at, and it's but churches tend to just we focus on week to week. I mean, it's in our DNA, and rather than focusing on maybe developing this missional season, so much of our energies go into just week to week. And let's just say what's true. I think just churches are exhausted from sort of the week to week 7-day turnaround. It's just exhaustion comes with having to have something every 7 days. And once you sort of begin to focus on that 7-day turnaround too much, I think you could compare it to sort of like parenting. When you think about having a kid, you're like, oh man, I want to nurture him and I want to love him and her, and I'm going to invest in my children, and then the baby comes, and then the rhythm starts, and then all of a sudden you got to get them up, you got to get them dressed, you got to get them fed, you got to change a diaper, and as they get older, you got to get them to school, you got to get through their homework, and you got to get, and that now instead of like I'm going to nurture them and develop them, I almost become sort of immersed in just the schedule, the tyranny of the urgent, the every 7 days, and you begin to focus on the moment rather than really what your missional focus that you've sort of declared would be. What's the purpose of raising children? Well, it's so easy to just get over in the schedule. Let's just be honest. I mean, it just gets boring and exhausting unless you keep your eye on the purpose. And I think that's the same way with weekend services. We need to keep our eye on the purpose because it gives us great clarity as we create content, as we look at where we're going. And it helps us sort of get our head out of just the 7 days, every 7 days.
Give us the next season framework that 12 Stone has developed.
Well, that sort of is that next season where we're saying, from a strategic standpoint, we're saying like our next season is exploring some of these things, which then leads us to that sort of that next strategy, right? Now you're saying we understand that we get clear and we get a ministry focus for a season. It allows your children's, your students, your high school students, middle school students, college students, your marriage ministries, all these things, your small groups, they can all get sort of on the same track, and they all understand sort of where we're going, because we're saying, okay, this next season, we are going to focus on the 3 core things that they really haven't honestly changed for us that much over the years. So it's being clear. We can, and I think our people probably communicate this. We're about transforming souls, transforming families, and transforming communities. And underneath those is, if you'd asked us a year and a half ago what that looked like, it's the difference now. That's what this strategy is. This strategy has to address this season. And although our long-term seasonal focus hasn't really changed all that much, because we're going to adapt a new strategy, it then requires better communication to our congregation. Here's what we've seen. Here's what we've learned. Here's what's going on in the culture around us. So these things don't change. we want to transform souls. It's evangelism, it's growing disciples, it's prayer, it's growing in character. These things pretty universal. But in this season, we're going to change it by adapting a new strategy or some different strategies.
Mhm.
We want to transform families. Why? Because, man, it's just there. You see them crumbling around you. And so raising up the next generation, this is the scriptural, admonition to, one generation passes on to the next generation, so that they might know of his marvelous deeds and his mighty works, that we are going to transform families. That really hasn't changed. That's, of course, a part of that season. That what's different in this season is the next strategy. Here's some things we've learned in the last 18 months. Here's what we think we need to do. Then transforming communities. Same thing there.
Well, give us some examples. Transforming kids ministry. Just what was and how have you adapted
you
and
know,
changed that strategy?
I don't think it's any surprise. I mean, our culture it just eats up and spits out families. It really does. And a part of it's the way we go do life. And so how we address helping people even just understand a balance and to having some of those things and to then walking alongside them. And I think we're just convinced that we have maybe a distinct anointing and God ordained calling to just try to reclaim families and see them strengthened and see them healthier marriages and that kind of thing. So we're going to invest in marriages. And that hasn't changed a lot. We've been using this re-engage. We're seeing tremendous success from that, and the stories coming out of that, because if we can get the hearts of the parents changed, families are transformed, right? But on the other side too, we've taken a look at that, and we're like, you know what? The other thing that has been changing, we're just convinced now is a time to make a pretty major change in what we're doing, and we just rolled this out this weekend actually, where we're saying, here is the structure of how we're going to help you as a family. And it's going to start with your elementary school kids, go to your middle school kids, and go to your high school kids. And again, one of the reasons we do this strategically is, I'm getting old. I'm an empty nester, I mean, there are families behind me that they need all the help they can get. And to assume biblical knowledge in this culture, seems unwise. I think some families do a great job with that, but for the most part, when somebody walks in after your church, you have to assume that they don't really know, and their children don't know. And so we want to teach them in elementary. We've just said, I think, because years ago, I think elementary curriculum really focused on values. Look at some of the popular curriculum out there. A lot of it focuses on values. We've just said, you know what? We are going to lay down a foundation of biblical knowledge. Now we're going to rewrite, restructure, recreate our elementary school K-5 curriculum so that there are check marks of things that they know. And I think a lot of churches probably are still, they might be really good at this. We looked at what we were doing and just said, you know what? I think we're assuming too much biblical knowledge. We need to really address that. And the place to address that now has moved back. You need that in elementary school. Because I think the place to then address values based on some biblical knowledge is in middle school. That's where they're starting to make more and more values-based decisions. And so our, biblical knowledge for elementary, and these are broad topics, but, biblical values in middle school. And then we're going to do biblical decision-making in high school. It's the implementation of our knowledge, our values into our decision making, and we're trying now to recreate a framework. So that's a new strategy for us. That's something we rolled out. We just rolled this out to the congregation last week. Tremendously received. I think parents really appreciate it. We're getting tremendous feedback from this, and we'll see. So we're going to go walk that out. That's pretty fresh. We've been working on stuff right now. We have that same thing in our transforming families. It's the same type of thing we're doing with marriages and some of our other care ministries and that kind of thing. That is just, it's a focus. And for this season, we're going to go play that out. We're going to try to develop that. That's a new strategy for us.
But next season, next strategy, next stories. give us a quick overview of what do you mean by next stories? Then I want to circle back and dig a little deeper
Okay.
in season strategy and stories.
Next stories to me is, I think it's just really easy. It's really easy again to sort of lose sight of this idea that what really motivates people and helps them understand what your actual season strategy is actual life change and actual stories. And I think we can all agree, Jesus, master storyteller, let's not sell the power of stories short. I think sometimes we look at testimony videos and we call them testimony videos. But what we're talking about here is the power of God moving on a human life and redeeming, restoring, and healing them. And the stories out of your ministries, in your leaders, and in your ministry life, these are the things that I think people are actively looking to find a God that is capable of doing that. And so, it's people actively trusting God. That's a huge story. That's a huge story. Tell the story of someone actively trusting God. And in part, I think this is what inspires other people to take the step of faith, whether it's in community or generosity. And we should be better at this. But
I love the definition, power of God moving on the human life. Did you just make that up? Or did you rip that off? It's pretty good.
Let's just say this. It ain't written down anywhere, so I don't know where that came from. Undoubtedly, in my 34 years of Christianity, somebody said that. I'll give credit.
Most likely, but right now you can take credit for it. I'll give
anonymous source, but I'll take credit for it until somebody can show me it originated with Oswald Chambers or somebody. I don't know.
No, most likely. Is it safe to say, based on your statement there, in a sense, we in the church would be prudent, wise to amplify where we see the power of God?
Yeah.
Is this a season to recognize and celebrate the supernatural?
To me, it's ironic that in a culture that is absolutely addicted to binging stories, that as a church, we don't understand that we would underestimate in any way. What is your conversation with people often rotate around at some point in time when you go out to dinner with somebody? It's what they're binging or what story they're watching or what documentary or whatever it might be. And as a church, I just think we're just beginning to grow in this. We're just beginning to really get better at this. And I think it's sort of sad that we're not better students of the craft. And again, back to the tyranny of the urgent, back to lengthening information timelines. It's the church isn't just about telling the stories of what God did. It's about telling the stories of what God's doing now. So absolutely we should empower that. Yes, absolutely we should tell that. Because otherwise, it's a present gospel. It is that the kingdom come now. And in whatever way that might be, whether that's in somebody's marriage, in somebody's children, somebody's parenting, in somebody's character, in whatever avenue. And here's what I sort of feel pretty sure about. For most churches, when they define their season or they begin to look at their strategy, this is just good biblical reasoning, good biblical strategies. These are things that we're praying that God does. And when he does those things, why wouldn't we put that out there? And so I think it's just encouraging churches to allow some leash to become better at telling great stories and learning how we need to learn how to watch stuff without just being entertained by it. Because when something moves you, you should pay attention to that, and then we should be learning from that. And that's not manipulative, that's good storytelling. So when we say, hey, Jesus was a good storyteller, and then we don't invest any time and energy into that in terms of how we're going to, in the next several months between now and the year-end generosity, really tell great stories that are about what God is doing through your local congregation, I think we're doing a disservice to what God would have us do, because people don't know and they don't hear, and we don't do a good job of telling them. So that's a tough one.
Next season, next strategy, next stories. Dave, as you think about a 12 stone and crafting this, do you think about envision casting for end of the year and into 2022? Do you think it's more appropriate to raise the bar and ask more of people? Or do we want to not take the risk of raising the bar that much? That may sound like it's too much of a setup. The obvious answer is to raise the bar here. But as you guys think that through, are you asking more of people, asking less of people, or about the same?
It's in some ways, Brad, it's putting the right opportunities and helping them build their own biblical worldview and then step into it. That's that active trust. And we are absolutely raising the bar on asking people to actively trust. We just finished 7 days, 7 nights of prayer. Just felt like going into this vision cast and into this, talking about this next season, some transitions that are happening here that, we want to be a church that's rooted in prayer. We opened it up for 7 nights, both in person and online. And that's a raising of the bar. I mean, that's asking a lot. Like in our culture, some places maybe not so much, but in ours, that's a big deal. So why wouldn't you? Well, and then you connect that. We're connecting that to what we believe prayer is essential in transforming souls. It's God's work. So yeah, we're going to raise the bar, but we're going to raise the bar across the board as you begin to look at what it means to be a disciple and to follow Him. So you should be seeing growth in your character. Yeah, you should be experiencing the transformation of your family, and yes, you should be making a dent in your community. But in order for them to see that, we have to tell the stories of those who are, so that they might even be able to envision themselves moving beyond watching the next binge watch of whatever. Stranger
Fill in the blank.
Yeah, Stranger Things is coming out. I got seven. There's 12 episodes. Okay, great. What are you doing to transform your community? That's really the question. So yeah,
60 seconds. It sounds foreign to me to hear. Hey, we just did 7 nights of prayer. There are not many churches that are tackling that in this season. That's asking a lot of people, and COVID and all that. 60 seconds, go. What did that look like? How many people showed up? How does that get constructed? Just give
and
a
this
quick
goes
brain
back
dump on that.
to seasons, I think, Brad. In some respects, we declared, early on as we came out of 2020, 2021, we wanted to be rooted in prayer. And in order to do that, it required some strategy or some thought or some emphasis from us. And so we've done quite a little bit. We did 21 days of prayer. We did 150 days of praying through the Psalms, where we just encouraged our people to, a day at a time, pray their way through the Psalms. And we sort of spent some time teaching to do that. Put out a video about once a week, and then streamed our Saturday prayer time. So prayer has been rooted in our culture for a long time. And I think it's one of those things that churches tend to talk about that you should do, and then it's just not in their culture enough, maybe. And we've sort of just didn't want to be guilty of that. We wanted to make sure we did. So the 7 nights of prayer was just an invitation. We just opened it up. And of course, we're coming out of COVID like everybody else. And it's out there with, we're just going to do it at one of our campuses. And so you'd have
10 people, 25 people.
We'd have about 1,500 people show up, but there'd be thousands more online.
1,500 people in the same place?
Yeah.
Praying? Simultaneously, just in the room.
It's been like we would do it every night from Saturday to Saturday, and we'd spend from 7 to 8, and there would be like an open prayer time, and then after that hour, we would release people, and then people who wanted to spend time praying or to be prayed for, we would pray until everybody was gone, which in many occasions was late into the evening.
Wow. And then that you showed that online, the actual
we did the hour. We did the hour online, and of course, we did on this one just say, look, we recognize you. It's guilt free. I mean, you might not be able to make all 7 nights. That's not the goal, is to check off all 7 nights. We talked about how in the scripture it says, God will reward those who earnestly seek Him. The question is, what's earnestly for you? If earnestly is just showing up and engaging in it online every night, and that would be a big step for you, then that's earnestly. That's good. But if earnestly is, you should be hitting your free or your open nights. I have 3 nights open this week, then that's earnestly. But again, this goes back to communicating well what the vision of this is. It's not the guilting, it's not anything else. It's just here's an opportunity, which is the raising of the bar. The opportunity. You raise the bar, that's the opportunity.
Was there a sense after that prayer season of, yeah, there was something supernatural that was happening here? And I know enough about the tradition and history of 12 Stone. You're not going to be way out there one way or the other. You're going to be pretty much mainstream. Was there a sense of, yeah, God showed up on this thing, if this was worth
Yeah,
it?
yeah. I just think anytime you pull aside, God's going to do things, and there's a lot of things that God did through that. But of all, again, back to just being clear on the season that we're in and in what way prayer is going to play into that. This was strategically what we decided we would do.
So next season, next strategy, next stories, as those stories are unfolded and people engage in prayer, of course, Ed Gennaris, part of our
Right,
niche and specialty is how
right.
do you fund this thing? How do you think, and this is an obvious answer here, but let's be straight up. How does that impact people in their giving when they hear season, next strategy, next stories, the power of God moving on a human life? That's a keeper
Yeah.
right there, and finding a God that is capable of doing that. So it's one thing, what's the power of God moving on a human life? We have myriads of options of gods to choose from. We would embrace, we have the one true God that capable of moving the power of a human life. But as you guys walk through this, or as you think about this, how does it affect giving?
Well, I mean, our the transformation of the human heart and character, to me, is then taught in those little moments, or is caught in those little moments where it's just gratitude, and giving out of gratitude is certainly the strongest kind of giving, because God is doing something, He's working, He's doing His thing. We make fairly clear, but I think over COVID, one of the things that's happened, I mean, we're not passing baskets anymore. Tons of it's done online, but we make sure to address it. But when we address giving, we're doing it through stories.
Hmm.
I mean, that's just the truth. And if we're going to make an appeal to give, if you would like to give, which is always it, and you're under no obligation, but if this somehow moves you or motivates you to be a part of it, you know, then jump online, or drop it in the box out in the lobby, whatever you want to do. But I think that goes back to when you talk about transforming souls, when you see God doing something, like for us over the course of this year, one of the things that God's been doing is the at-home side. And we're about to tell a story of, some things that are happening way outside of where we live. I mean, like geographically other states. And so we've sort of began playing around with, yeah, we're one church with 7 locations, but COVID really sort of began to expand our thinking. We're going to explore this. We're not sure where it leads, but we're going to explore it. And we're going to be one church with 2 expressions. That's in live, in person, and at home. And where that goes from there, from church planning to church partnerships or support, we don't know for sure. But at home has become like a thing. Our team has done such a killer job with this, and it's motivating people. They're looking at this, and not only are they starting their own at-home groups sometimes around here, but it's an expression of the church where people gather together in homes and neighborhoods and worship, and they look for community and impact. And we're seeing this. We're telling a story this weekend of some folks that we just did a leaders training for our at-home leaders. They flew in from Spokane. Well, you tell them,
Spokane,
Washington.
Washington, which you're based in Atlanta. So
Yeah.
that's a 5-hour flight.
Yes.
Spokane to Atlanta
And
at
they
their
got
expense.
with us, Brad. This is such a great story. They got with us. How'd they find us? We did during COVID 4 or 5 weeks of date nights because people were locked in their houses. So we put on about an hour's date night at 9 o'clock. Put your kids to bed, and we're gonna do a date night activity that you guys can do. You as a couple. That's how they got with us, and they started inviting some of their friends to the date nights every week, and they would do what we were doing on the date nights. And then at the end of that, they're like, they had found about the church, and then they jumped in. They started watching online, and they invited their friends to be online. Then we opened up, if you want to become an at-home group and you want to be a leader, here's the training and here's what we need to do. And they made contact with us, and we've been working with them and developing them and supporting them as they go through this. And then now we've got like a presence in Spokane. You tell these stories to people. Like, who could have seen this coming in the midst of a pandemic? This was not in the plan, but God. And I love the but God stories because
Mhm.
that's what motivates me to give.
Hmm.
And I think,
But Dave, two quick questions here. 20 seconds. What was a date night example?
oh, we had a chef come in and make steaks or make cakes. We'd tell them before, get these ingredients together, and then we're gonna make a cake
Fun.
together. We would do like I'm trying to think of the other ones. We did dance lessons. We brought in some instructors, and they taught. We would have like six people, like three couples there, and they would learn to dance, and you could learn to dance at home. And we'd do trivia stuff. We'd have some fun. You'd do some
Oh, fun.
interactive
Good.
stuff. That's sort of what we did.
All
Just
right. So,
anything to
so, so
entertain
Dave, you
ourselves.
have this cool story of Spokane. How do I know that's just not one that you lucked into and you get
But
to tell the
again,
story, but you
isn't
don't
that
have
like?
very many others?
Oh no, we got yeah. That's the amazing thing about what's happening is at home. We have them in Dallas, we have them in Marietta, we have them in Chattanooga. I could go through the list. Now we've sort of said, what if our new strategy was a gospel presence in every state? What if? We don't
Mhm.
know. Not that 50 is a magic number. It's just what. And then you're like, well, why stop here? Why not over? We don't know, but we know this, man. When God's doing something, go join Him, get in on it, do your due diligence as a leader, be strategic about it. But in this season, we just said, man, we're going to make 12 Stone home in some way. You know, you can join us live. We're still here. But at home, we have it at a coffee shop downtown now. There's one at a tap room up here in the other part. And different types of people are coming, but we're seeing life change. We're seeing baptisms and we're seeing salvations. And we're seeing that in a number of places throughout the course of the country. Like I said, our team has killed this. They're doing great with this. David Grant and his team just killing the
Hmm.
at-home stuff. And it's all brand new to us. But again, I think it's really motivational for people. We're just saying, here's what we see God doing. And over the course of this, we're going to continue to tell stories about what God is doing. And it's about the next story.
So
We're
part
not going
of,
to tell testimonies that are 5 years old. We don't want to be that church. Those are still powerful and they're still appropriate.
hmm.
I want to be telling the stories that are happening now and in these moments and in the past few months and
Hmm.
how God has moved to bring someone in and to transform their heart and
A
transform.
good bit of the mantra that we're hearing coming out of COVID is engagement.
Yeah.
How do we having a hard time getting volunteers and people in groups? As 12 Stone has talked about next season, next strategy, next stories, and the power of God moving on the human life, seeing engagement come out of that. I've got to assume that you are
Yeah,
seeing.
our metrics are all scrambled like everybody else. The way that we used to do this. So now we're looking at our weekend service views differently and the number of engagements we have there. We have to sort of track the at-home groups, how many people, how many kids, how many. We're trying to now build in how we're doing in that, and then our small groups and other interest groups like our care ministries or our recovery ministries or our marriage ministries or those types of things. They're all increasing, and so yes, we're seeing engagement, but man, what's that mean? I don't know. Check back with us at the end of 2022, and or at the going into next summer. We're going to know more, but we're really
Mhm.
clear on what we're going to do strategically, and then we'll come up and really be able to take a look at it and measure whether that's being effective.
Next
We don't
season,
want to
next
just we don't
strategy,
want to
next
just
stories.
be busy. I mean, that's not the point. It's just to be busy, but it's if it's strategic and it's connected to our purpose of the season, then we're going to go put our heart, mind, and soul into it.
Mhm. Uh, Couple questions as we wrap up here, tying it back into vision casting and then giving. Those are correlated, especially with the next stories, the power of God moving on a human life. Let's think in terms of a couple bands of givers, BANDS, major givers, people that have financial capacity. And I know 12 Stone enough, you don't show them favoritism. If anything, you raise the bar significantly higher for those that have financial capacity to give. What's their reaction to this? Are they engaged and excited even more, or like still on the sidelines, seeing if this really sticks?
Well, we're certainly staying in contact in that respect, but honestly, we felt like we've got to go get clear and lay out a clear path and strategy. So we're in the process of doing that. We're fortunate that, from a giving base, we've been doing very well coming through the pandemic. But the truth of it is, this is another thing. I think even with growing people's giving, you could probably apply seasons, strategies, and stories to that as well. That there is a way, there is a season that they're going to be in. You need to understand what that is, and you need to be able to communicate to them how that intersects with them. There's a strategy to this whole thing, and that you need to prove yourself to be capable of managing, and that your money is well used. I mean, these are the folks that are going to ask the right questions, and you need to come up with a way to get the right answers. And then you got to tell stories again. Everyone there is motivated by what God is doing. And so as they see these things, yes, they're going to be engaged. But will we have even a deeper, a longer strategy moving ahead to going through next year? Yeah, I mean, I imagine we will do more, even very strategic or focused as we get clearer. I mean, we've also got to get really clear on what now 2022, 23 is going to be.
Oh yeah, there's that, isn't there?
Yeah.
You may not know the answer to this, but does a at-home church that meets in a tap room, do those people give financially?
Yeah.
That's a riot. Come on.
It's pretty crazy.
Who knew
Yeah.
that could happen?
Well, and it's a one fun deal. I mean, we're doing the same thing that so many of our generous folks are doing. It's that when you give, you know what I love? Here's the story. I love this story that came out, and we'll tell it this weekend. I think it's going to be a part of the weekend. The guys and the families from Spokane, or the family from Spokane, came down, and they go out to lunch, and they engage their server. And they said, "Man, well, we're down here. We're going to do this training at 12 Stone. Have you ever heard 12 Stone?" No, 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 no. Well, you need to come with us. The server shows up at 12 Stone with this guy with this family on Sunday. And what I love is there's no differentiation in his mind between 12 Stone at home and 12 Stone live. There isn't. It's all just 12 Stone. And he values, in a sense, what it is God's doing in him and in his community. And he knows that he could freely invite someone here in Atlanta, a state that he doesn't live in a town that he doesn't live in. And he jumps into that. So, I mean, I think those are those things that you look at and you're just like, those stories need to be told, because that's good gospel living. I mean, that's just the gospel playing out in real life. And so, I mean, that's pretty
fun. A question that occurs to me: is it vision that now unifies the congregation, or are you unified and then the vision comes out of that unity?
Yeah, we've had these conversations. I think in years past, when we would have such unity moving forward, and we were pretty clear on, remember when you used to do like 5-year plans? Those are the days, right? Yeah. Now we're lucky to do 5 months. But I think that we would have more unity, and that would drive the vision. I honestly think now that we are in a season as churches, that a gospel-centered vision is the most compelling thing in the world, and it is something that people will quickly unify behind. And that's where our vision, and we're really just painting the picture of the gospel that Jesus and the New Testament brings together out of the Old Testament. And you're just like, we have to go do a really good job of that, because that's where the unity is going to come from. So we do feel a little bit like a part of gathering the people back together, because this is the season we're in, right? I mean, we're all trying to come back together and unify and to join together. Well, you got to know what you're joining together for. What am I leaning into? I think it was clearer a year or two ago for a lot of people. It's unclear now. So you don't have that unity that maybe that you once did. This is, again, the reason why you've got to go address that moving forward.
Wow. Hey, fascinating stuff. And I know that you give yourself away, well, not give, you do consulting around the vision casting piece. I would bet some folks are interested in you helping them frame up some of this prayer strategy, because I believe you have been running point on a lot of those projects for 12
Well,
Stone.
I've been responsible for a couple. Chris Morgan and some of those guys are the ones that are carrying it. But the prayer strategy is that's just been who we are for forever. But I'm passionate about that for sure.
Yeah, you're very good and creative around that. So to connect with you, best email would be?
And maybe Christy can put this on there, but it's just dave.ronne@generis.com. That's the most direct link to me.
Good. And we got to spell that RONNE, as we
Yes.
see on the lower left hand.
No phonics involved in that name. It's just
there. Siri doesn't know Ronnie.
No.
Siri knows Ron.
I have to say Debbie Ron. That's my wife. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Well, it's good. Yeah, it's nice that you're calling someone who is your wife on all that. So dave.ronne@generis.com, and I know you'd be happy to have a conversation, exploratory conversation, but you can bring your expertise and 25 years experience at a church where God has evidently and very obviously the power of God moving on a human life or human lives, as God has greatly used 12 Stone on a grand level there. Dave, thanks for the insight, man. Good stuff. And thanks for hearing the Lord. Thanks for having a good team of people around you to make all this happen. And thanks for giving us the insight. Appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks for just letting me share that. If it can motivate some folks, and if I can help, that'd be great. But all this happens because there's great people working on it every day, and it certainly, I don't intend to take any credit for stuff that I'm not personally responsible for, but I do take great pride in the discussions and the things and the leadership that we've done and we've provided over the course of this time. And if I can't help you, I could probably connect with who can.
I've seen some of the churches and leaders that you've helped. You can help. It's pretty cool to see the fruit of your work there. And if somebody's curious, at least have an exploratory conversation with Dave on that.
I love
David.
doing it.
Dave, sorry, I did David twice.
That's all right, man. You're like the only person, Brad. That's beautiful, man.
Well, you can call me Bradley. Technically,
I feel the love. I feel the love.
You can call me Bradley, and
I feel the love. Thanks.
All right, thanks, David. Appreciate it. Bye.
Thanks, Bradley.